We're going to do one of my favorite things on this week's episode. We're going crappie fishing. I love to catch those panfish. We're going to talk about a couple of times of the year when the crappie fishing can be very difficult. Hopefully we'll unravel the puzzle for you a little bit on this week's show. I love to crappie fish with a long crappie pole. Going to get to do that today, and you get to go along for the ride because Fox Sports Outdoors is on the air right now.
You're watching the only program with weekly fishing reports and real-time outdoor news from the Southwest region. This is Fox Sports Outdoors.
Hi everybody, I'm really glad you're with us because we're going crappie fishing on this week's episode. You know, there are two times of the year when the crappie can be very difficult to find and catch. That's the spring and the fall in their transition time. They're transitioning to spawn in the spring, and they're transitioning out to deep water for the winter time in the fall. So we're going to go out today on one of my favorite crappie lakes. We're in east central Oklahoma right now. This is Lake Eufaula. It's a big sprawling lake. It's got arms and fingers and bays and ditches and canals running everywhere. It can be a very daunting place to locate crappie, especially in the transition time of the year. But hopefully we'll give you some tips and pointers today that will help you locate and catch them in the transition times on your favorite body of water. While we're doing that, we're taking you around the region for your fishing reports for this week from our expert team of insider reporters from lakes, rivers, and bays right where you live. Right now, we're going to get the Nitro boat launched out in Lake Eufaula, Oklahoma. When we come back, we'll be out there fishing. Right now, let's get things started back at the FSN studios with your weekend planner.
Great news. According to the Salooner tables, both days of the weekend will offer excellent game fish activity. Peak daytime hours will begin in the afternoon at 1:53 on Saturday and 2:42 on Sunday. Expect the sun to rise at 7:16 and set at 7:47. And evenings will feature a full moon on Saturday. We'll be right back with all of the current fishing reports from around the area. And I'll return with 2012 Classic champion Chris Lane on this week's Ask the Pro feature. Back in a bit.
Fox Sports Outdoors is brought to you by Tracker Boats. It's more than a boat, it's a tracker. Mercury Outboards, go boldly. Lowrance and the new Hook 2, the world's easiest fish finder. And Louisiana Travel. Plan your fishing trip at louisianatravel.com.
I want you to look how fat her belly is. Those eggs are starting to ripen in there. So let me set the stage for you here. You can see I'm on a big long riprap here. That's a big highway up there. And I'm just using the trolling motor to kind of cover some water and set the stage for finding where the fish are. So I'm just moving real slow with my crappie rod. There's one right there. All right. Not a big one, but a keeper anyway. So what you've got to do first is just find them. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, in the spring, the fish are going to come off the main lake. And out here behind me, you can actually see an opening to the main lake. And they're going to come back in these bays, the mouths of creeks. And they're just going to sit there and they're going to let their eggs ripen. They're going to wait for that water temperature to warm up, wait till it's time to spawn, and then they're going to run right up in all that thick stuff right there. And that's where they're going to spawn, in that brush, right up along the shoreline in literally a foot to 18 inches of water. Before they get there though, they're just sitting out here in open water, eating shad, eating bait. You can actually catch them this way. All I'm doing is just using this trolling motor and easing my way along. And I've got about 8 feet of line out. I'm just dropping it down and I'm in about 10 feet of water. So I'm keeping it about 2 feet off the bottom. You got to cover a lot of water until you locate where the fish are. We'll talk more about that here in just a little bit.
Hey friends, Captain Kevin Broussard here with your Fox Sports Louisiana Outdoor Report. Tell you what, we're going to talk freshwater fishing this week. Right now, the spawn is on. Toledo Bend, Darbone, Bistineau. Lots of bass getting caught up shallow. The trees, the cypress trees in Darbone, Bistineau, I'll tell you what, soft plastics work real slow around the edge of those, seem to be the key. Toledo Bend, I tell you what, look for some clear water, look for some bedding fish up around the buckbrush or the hay grass. If you catch a big girl, get a picture, let her go, keep you a few to eat. The other thing that's going on, white perch right now. There's still some up shallow, 8 to 12 feet. Tube jig seems to be the best right there. But they're starting to transition into your brush pile. So if you do know where some good deep brush piles are, live shiners, 20 to 30 feet of water over the brush pile seem to be doing best there. Won't be long, the bluegill and chickapin, they're gonna be moving up in 4 to 8 foot of water, and it'll be time to catch those. Biggest thing right now, springtime, fishing's going off. Hope you get out on the water. Happy fishing, and may God bless.
You know, this style of fishing is just covering a lot of water, because what you're trying to do is just find these open water fish that are not up against anything, not on any structure or cover or anything. They're just free floating fish, and they're eating. Actually, I can show you on my graph, but they're eating a bunch of shad in here, and I can actually see the shad that these fish are eating, even though I'm in only 8 or 10 feet of water. There's one right there. Come up here, buddy. Oh, there he is. Well, come here. I need to start using a net on some of these or I'm going to lose them. That's a keeper fish right there. Now you can see that is a female crappie. And how you can tell is I want you to look how fat her belly is. Those eggs are starting to ripen in there. So this is a fish that's coming into this bay, feeding up heavily. They're very aggressive. They feed a lot when they're on pre-spawn, before they spawn. So they go in there, finally when the water temperature gets warm enough and those eggs ripen, they'll go in there next to the shoreline, make a bed, just kind of like a bass does, lay those eggs, the males fertilize it, and then they're gonna transition back, and you can catch them the same way, just covering water, open water, using your trolling motor to move the boat, not doing a lot of casting, just using a long rod, nice and steady, move with your trolling motor, cover a bunch of water, and you'll just come across these fish, and they're not on bottom either. They're suspended 2, 3, 4 feet up off bottom. You've got to experiment around until you can figure out exactly what they're doing on any given day. That's a fat female there. There is a classic pre-spawn fish. There we go. Look at him pull on my Mr. Crappie rod. That's a decent fish. Well, I'm gonna have to use the net because I can't get my rod to hang on to him well enough. All right. Here's another keeper. Oh, the hook came out of his mouth. There's another keeper for you anyway. I want to show you something here real quick if I can get my trolling motor to pull me back around. It's really about where these fish are. It's not so much about what color you're using or the technique you're using. You have to find where these fish are. When they're in transition, headed to spawn or headed back from spawning, or in the fall headed out to deep water, you got to get in the right location. I want to show you something here. If we can show you just in front and to the left of us here, that is a spawning cove. You can see right around that little point to the left, that is a place where those fish are gonna go up there and spawn. What I've done is position myself right outside the mouth of that cove so I can catch crappie that are both transitioning into spawn, and I can also catch the ones that are headed back out. That's what you've got to do in the early spring, late spring, and in the fall time if you're gonna catch these transitioning, migrating crappie like that one there. Into the live well that one goes.
Hey, a lot of Oklahoma families took advantage of last week's spring break here in the state to go fishing, and from the reports I got, the white bass fishing is good in many places across the state right now. It's exactly what Brian Potter of Claremore was doing with daughter Kinsey and son Ethan. They were fishing below the Grand Lake Dam, fishing for those white bass, targeting eddies, throwing some flashy lures, and as you can see, they often caught 2 at a time and big old fat white bass. Those 2 kids really did a great job fishing. Also, Brody Owens, age 8 from Bonita, you can see here that he's a fishing machine. He too is fishing those same type areas in the Grand River and caught some really nice ones on this day. Now, Adam Mason is a crappie guide on the Grand River system. He's been targeting that species and also doing quite well doing that. Most of those guys in the Grand right now are looking for the current, fishing the slack water eddies behind it, and throwing some type of swing bait. The Riley Grub by LaRue is really good for that. Thanks Mike Taylor for all the great video of the Grand River fishing system. Now April 1st has always marked a fun time in the outdoors here in Oklahoma. White bass fishing is really good this time. You can catch them, but you can't catch them if you don't go.
Boy, this is really something, this finesse fishing like this. These fish, I'm kind of getting dialed in on what's happening. I see the fish down there suspended up off the bottom, and I can actually raise my bait up to the level that the fish are. There's one. Oh, good one. That's a good one. That's a fat female there. There is a classic pre-spawn fish. This fish has not moved in there to make a bed yet. Look at the belly on that one. Look how fat and rounded that belly is right there. That will make some grease stink right there, and in that one goes. All right, well, when you're fishing like this on these transition crappie, you've got to be real flexible and real mobile. You can't really get locked into a spot. You can't sit there and anchor up. I'm not using the anchor lock feature on my trolling motor. I'm constantly moving, searching. Got actually 2 rods. My cameraman, my brother, has actually got 1 rod with 2 jigs, and I've got 2 more, so we've got 4 jigs in the water, and we're covering lots and lots of water up and down to locate these fish. One thing we are finding too is when you catch one, typically there's going to be a few more. They're running in these little packs, these little herds up and down here, males and females together. Obviously that one was a female. All right, getting dialed in. It got something working here on Lake Eufaula.
Fox Sports Outdoors is brought to you by Lew's. Feel the difference. Gene LaRue and Bobby Garland. We know bass and crappie from heads to tails. And by Glacier Glove. Stay outdoors longer with our gloves, hats, and shades.
You know, you're so used to being conditioned crappie fishing that the fish are always going to be on the bottom. And they're absolutely not. There he comes. There's one. That's a decent fish right there. They're real finicky right now. These transition fish, when they're not spawning and they're just up here roaming around in open water, can get real hard to catch. So one thing that I've done, we're putting these in an ice chest right here, is I've gone to a double jig rig. What I've done is I've tied a loop knot on the top jig, and I've used a real small jig. That's a 1/16 ounce Bobby Garland Mo-Glo jig head. And then about 18 inches below that, I've got a heavier head. That is a, I think it's maybe an 1/8 ounce. So I've got the heavy one on the bottom, and that holds it down, and then the bigger one up top. And as that's sliding through the water column, a lot of times this one will be down closer to the bottom, but if the fish suspend up a little bit, they'll catch this top one. That loop knot's real important too, because it lets that jig head flutter. It lets it float real smooth in the water. And when you're fishing open water, you're not jigging brush. You want it to slide through that water column real smooth, and that's what this double jig rig does right here. I'll show you the baits up closer and the rod and reel I'm using a little bit later. It's a real cool rig for when you're fishing straight up and down, vertically fishing like this.
Hi folks, this week's Lone Star Lakes is brought to you once again by the good folks at Fiberworks. They know how stressful boat repair in particular can be to you, the consumer, and they'll do everything they can to make it a painless process. Now this week we've come to Lake Nacogdoches, just outside Nacogdoches, Texas. I can't say enough about this fantastic little lake. It is full of big bass. Just since we've been here, it's given up several fish close to double digits, 8s, 9s, and one gentleman reported an 11 being caught. We've had a good 2 or 3 days out here. We've been fishing everything from Hard plastic jerk baits, soft jerk baits, deep diving crankbaits. We've used some A-rigs, and we fished the jig and pig spinner bait and the rattle trap. All of this has worked to some degree or another. These fish are about to transition onto beds. The full moon is going to bring them up strong. Look to the shallows on Lake Dakinish. That's this week's Lone Star Lakes, brought to you once again by Fiberworks Marine Collision. When good enough just isn't good enough. Now let's check in with Mr. Bill Olson. He's on the coast.
Hi folks, Texas Outdoors Journal brings you this week's report, and it has once again been named the #1 major outdoor magazine in Texas. You can count on timely, accurate hunting and fishing tips every month, 12 times a year from TOJ's top outdoor professionals. Pick up a copy of Texas Outdoors Journal on newsstands or subscribe and save at texasoutdoorsjournal.com or call 713-957-3997. Where to go to get away from freshwater flow? Well, on the upper coast that is most influenced by river runoff, look to areas away from where the water leaves the bays to mix with the Gulf. That will be in the marsh areas or around West Galveston Bay. Fish similar places around Matagorda and Port O'Connor. From San Antonio Bay on southward, the river influence is a lot less. Now it is a matter of dealing with the wind, plus the grass beds help to keep the water clarity pretty good. Don't forget to fish the mouths of drains of back lakes. South of the JFK Causeway, it's grass beds to Baffin Bay shoreline and rocks, through the land cut with more grass beds around Port Mansfield all the way to Port Isabel. This weekend, both Saturday and Sunday have a double tide schedule of 2 high and 2 low tides each day. I'm Bill Olson, and I'll see you on the coast.
Got him. There he is. Ooh, that's a good pull. Oh yeah, that's a good fish. There we go. That's a good one. All right. That is the biggest one so far. Look at that big dude. And hit the top jig. Let me mention something here. I've really discovered something. I have caught several fish today that were suspended off the bottom. You know, you're so used to being conditioned crappie fishing that the fish are always going to be on the bottom. And they're absolutely not. There are so many fish that are just roaming around suspended between the top and the bottom. In fact, I want to show you a quick shot of this graph. All these fish that you're looking at, those are all fish, by the way. Fish and scattered bait, little threadfin shad. And you can see those fish are about 8 feet down in anywhere from 11 to 14, 15 feet of water, something like that. That's the fish that we're fishing for right now. So this rod is 11 feet. And so I'm measuring about that much. That's about 8 or 9. Dropping it over the side, letting my rod tip go down to the water. And that tells me that I am right about 8 feet as far as the level goes. And that puts my bait right at that level where all those fish you see on that graph are hanging. And man, they will bite it like that. So pay attention to what's going on. Don't just assume that they're always going to be on the bottom, because many times they're not.
You can always watch our latest episode on the front page of our website at foxsportsoutdoors.com. Catch up on past episodes by clicking the archive button and learn about fishing techniques and new gear at our how-to page. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter for new fishing videos every day. Simply search for Fox Sports Outdoors and click the like button on Facebook and follow button on Twitter. And watch a new episode every week on any device by downloading the free Waypoint TV app on your phone, tablet, computer, or smart TV. Fox Sports Outdoors is brought to you by MotorGuide's new wireless and easy-to-use XI3. XI batteries, powering the world forward. Waypoint Marine, the Gulf Coast's leading saltwater boating specialist. And Strike King, designed by the pros, fished by you.
Welcome back, everyone. It's time for the Ask the Pro question. This week, Jason asks, on a crowded lake, how much room do I need to give to another angler's boat? For the answer, we asked 2012 Bassmaster Classic champion, Chris Lane.
When it comes to the distance that you give another angler, you know, that gets real hairy in situations, because whether you're fishing a point or whether you're fishing in back of a cove, if you're fishing against another angler and he's in that tournament, you know, kind of give him the same respect as you think you would like to get from him. That could be boat to boat, that could be 100 yards apart. You got to remember they invert the fields on the Elite Series for us, so you know, whatever goes around is going to come back around. If you're out there and you're watching, or if you're spectating, or if you're just out there fishing, you know, hey, same thing. Treat others as you want to be treated as well. So, you know, a safe distance is, you know, at least a good long cast.
Thanks, Chris. If you have a question for one of the anglers, visit our website, follow the Ask the Pro link, and send it in. Now here's this week's Big Catch of the Week winner.
Hey everybody, we're back at the boat ramp and it's time right now for this week's winner in the Big Catch of the Week contest. Somebody gets their big fish photo on television. Here's this week's winner. He is Rene Esprion of South Lake, Texas, showing a 26-inch speckled trout he caught at Port O'Connor, Texas. If you'd like to be our next winner, just go to our website at foxsportsoutdoors.com, click on the Big Catch of the Week box on the right side of the homepage, follow the instructions to send us your photo. Next up on our gear segment, here are some specialized items that you'll need if you want to do some of the vertical drifting crappie fishing like we did on this week's show. It begins with the Mr. Crappie Custom Graphite 11-foot crappie rod. It's a 2-piece rod with perfect action for dabbling, still fishing, or vertical drifting like we were doing. And it's paired with the Mr. Crappie Solo Reel, again, perfect for this style of fishing. Now I want to show you the double jig rig. You can see that we did use some real bright fluorescent yellow line, which you can get away with in this muddy water. And let me show you how to tie the loop knot, which is the top knot on a double jig rig. You want the lightest of the two jigs up top, so you thread it through the lightest jig first. You take the tag in and pull a couple of feet of slack through. You grab both lines, hold it with your thumb and your third finger, and then wrap it 1, 2, 3 times around both those fingers. Spread those fingers apart, stick that jig through, then pull all those loops off your finger, hold them down about the distance from the jig you want them, tighten them down, then you take both ends, the tag end and the main line, you pull those tight, and there you have the loop. And then you put your heavier jig down on the other end about 18 inches below it, and that's the double jig rig. We live in a victim culture today. Everyone seems to be a victim of someone or something. And that makes all of us not responsible for our own bad choices and bad behavior. That's a lie and a pitiful excuse. Not our society or our past or our parents or even mean people will make our future choices for us. We will make them. Now, I'm not discounting that many folks have been through a living hell in their past, but freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. Thanks for joining us today from beautiful Lake Eufaula, Oklahoma, one of America's greatest crappie lakes. If you'd like to contact Larry Birchfield for a guide trip, there's his contact information right on the screen. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter for daily videos that you won't see here on the television show. From Oklahoma, until next week, I'm Barry Stokes. Be safe, have fun. Bye-bye, y'all.